Hello friends, I'm Dr. Khalil and I'll take you through the imaging findings of optic neuritis. And before I take you to the radiological aspects of optic neuritis, we'll begin the discussion by understanding the normal anatomy of the optic nerve, how the optic nerve appears on the MR images. Then we'll understand what are the various sequences that we use, what is a fat saturated image, what is STIR MRI, what is a FLAIR MRI, along with our T1 and T2 weighted images. Then we'll understand the various radiological aspects that we see in various etiologies of optic neuritis. So let's begin the discussion by understanding the normal anatomy. Now let's look at these four segments of the optic nerve on the MR imaging. So you can see here, this is a T2 weighted MRI. So this is T2 weighted MRI. You can see that the fluid signal is white. Fluid is white on T2. So the vitreous, the subarachnoid space, the suprasellar cistern here, the sulcal spaces, they appear white. So this is a T2 weighted imaging. So let's understand the different segments of the optic nerve on this T2 weighted imaging. So if you can see here, this first part here, just near the scleral opening, near the optic disc, this is your intraocular part of your optic nerve. The next one, the intraorbital part, which is having that subarachnoid space around it. I hope you can see the white hyperintense signal there. That is a subarachnoid space around. So this part, the longest part, this is the intraorbital part. Then here, if you see near the bony optic canal, along with the branch of the internal carotid, that is the ophthalmic artery. So along with the ophthalmic artery, the optic nerve passes in the bony optic canal, and this is your intracanalicular part. And lastly, if you see here, just near the suprasellar cistern, the CSF space there near the pituitary, above the pituitary, that's the suprasellar cistern, the CSF signal you can see, that is the suprasellar cistern. And this part, just before it forms the optic chiasma, this is the prechiasmatic part. So these are the four segments of the optic nerve on imaging. Now let's look at the various sequences of MRI that we use while imaging of the optic nerve. So here, this is your axial T1 weighted imaging. So this image here, this is the axial T1 weighted image. This is a axial T2 weighted image. And you can see here, this is a coronal T1. And this is your coronal T2 weighted image. Remember, water is white on T2, right? Water is white on T2. That is, any fluid signal will appear hyperintense or white on T2 weighted imaging. So if you see the fluid inside the vitreous, the fluid in the cisternal spaces, the fluid in the sulcal spaces, that appears dark on T1, whereas the fluid in the vitreous, the fluid in the cisternal spaces, the fluid in the sulcal spaces, it appears white on T2 weighted imaging. So that is how we know which is T1 weighted and which is T2 weighted image. Now, let's understand how T1 weighted and T2 weighted images can be differentiated. So if you look at a T1 weighted image, in T1 weighted image, the CSF signal appears dark. The fluid is dark on T1 weighted imaging. You call it hypointense. It appears dark or hypointense. So any CSF or fluid signal appears hypointense on a T1 weighted image. And the gray matter of the brain, the gray matter appears gray and the white matter appears white. So this is how we have a T1 weighted image. They go by their names. Gray appears gray, white appears white. The white matter appears white, gray matter appears gray, and the CSF appears dark or hypointense on T1 weighted imaging. Let's understand how T2 weighted images appear. T2 weighted images, the fluid, the CSF or the fluid appears bright. We know World War II, water is white on T2. So they appear bright or hyperintense. Anything which is white on MRI, you call it hyperintense. It appears hyperintense. And the gray matter appears whitish and the white matter appears dark or gray in case of T2 weighted imaging. That means right opposite of what T1 was. So T1 gray matter was gray, white matter was white. On T2, gray matter is white and white matter is dark. This is how we differentiate T1 and T2 weighted imaging. And one more important thing that I want you to understand while imaging the orbits is to understand that fat appears hyperintense both on T1 and T2 weighted imaging. So fat appears hyperintense on MRI, hyperintense on your regular sequences on T1 as well as T2 weighted MRI. So because fat appears hyperintense, the intraconal fat, the peribulbar fats, right? So these fat areas, they appear hyperintense. And that is why when you are imaging the optic nerve to look at the inflammation or edema of the optic nerve, it is important that you suppress the surrounding fat. Only if you suppress the fat, the inflammation or the edema of the optic nerve will be appearing very clearly to you. And that is the reason we use fat suppressing sequences in MRI. So if you look at this image, on this image, you can see that the vitreous appears white, right? You can see the subarachnoid space around the optic nerve is appearing white. The sulcal spaces, right? So the sulcal spaces, the cisternal spaces, they are appearing white. So this is your T2 weighted MRI. So this is T2 weighted MRI. Please understand, whenever we have a optic neuritis, when the optic nerve gets swollen, you see this subarachnoid space around it, it gets effaced because of this swollen optic nerve. The subarachnoid space around the optic nerve gets effaced. Now look at this image here. Now what do you think is this image? This is an axial section. You can see this is an axial section. Is it a T1 weighted image or a T2 weighted image? If you see, the vitreous is appearing dark and the sulcal spaces are appearing dark. And if you understand that the outer gray matter is gray and the inner white matter appears white. So if you can appreciate, the gray matter is grayish and the inner white matter is white. So this is a T1 weighted image. And if you look at the intraconal fat, how is it? The intraconal fat, the peribulbar fat, it is appearing dark. So is it a regular T1 weighted image? No, it is a fat suppressed sequence. So this is axial T1 weighted fat suppressed sequence. And we need fat suppression so that any edema inflammation can be better seen, right? If it is not done, there will be so much of background whiteness or background hyperintensity that you may miss out small edemas. So to visualize this kind of enhancement, to visualize the edema in the optic nerve, it is better to go for fat suppressed sequences. And what is this image here? What section is this? Is it axial, sagittal or coronal? I hope you all know this is a sagittal. Is it a T1 weighted image, T2 weighted image, or anything else comes to your mind? If you look at the vitreous of the eye, that is dark. If you look at the sulcal spaces, they are appearing dark. Even the CSF in the ventricles is appearing dark. And if you see the gray matter, the outer gray matter is slightly brighter than the white matter. The white matter appears dark. So this is not T1 weighted image because the outer gray is appearing whiter and white matter is darker. In T1 weighted image, you should have a white matter which appears white and gray matter which appears gray. They go by their name in T1 weighted imaging. So this is not a T1 weighted image. This is a sagittal FLAIR MRI. Now what do you understand by this word FLAIR MRI? FLAIR stands for fluid attenuation. Fluid attenuation, inversion recovery sequence. Inversion recovery sequence. Now, FLAIR is similar to T2. You can learn it as it's similar to T2. The gray matter appears white and the white matter appears dark, same as T2. Only thing that happens different in FLAIR is that we suppress the fluid signal. The fluid signal is suppressed. Okay, this is a fluid suppressing signal. It's similar to T2 weighted image with fluid suppression. So you will see that the gray matter is white, white matter is dark, but the CSF, the vitreous, the fluid signals are suppressed. And this FLAIR imaging will make the periventricular edemas or brain edema stand out much better. So this FLAIR sequence is a very good sequence to look at plaques of MS. Remember, in multiple sclerosis, the plaques are periventricular. And if I do a regular T2 weighted imaging, the CSF in the ventricles will appear bright and the periventricular edema will also appear hyperintense. So the pathology is especially they appear white on T2 weighted imaging. So if you have a periventricular hyperintensity, it is very difficult to distinguish the CSF signal in the ventricles and the periventricular hyperintensity. So it is better to suppress the CSF signal by using FLAIR imaging so that only periventricular hyperintensities, the brain edema can be visualized by suppressing the CSF signal or the fluid signal present in the ventricles. So this is what a FLAIR MRI does. It is same as T2 weighted imaging, but the fluid signals are suppressed, and so the brain edema or any pathologies within the brain can stand out much better. It's a very good sequence to look at the plaques of MS, because in MS we mainly have periventricular lesions. Now we'll come to the imaging of optic neuritis. In optic neuritis, we know optic neuritis can be associated with multiple sclerosis. There are idiopathic causes. There are inflammatory causes seen in sarcoidosis, lupus, granulomatosis with polyangiitis. There can be infective causes of optic neuritis like syphilis, tuberculosis, herpes zoster, Lyme's disease. So optic neuritis can be due to infective causes also. MOG antibodies like the autoimmune oligodendropathy that you have, right? So MOG antibodies, anti-MOG antibodies are also causing optic neuritis. And aquaporin 4 antibody or the NMO spectrum of disorders, right? Autoimmune astrocytopathy is also another cause for optic neuritis. Let's try to understand how the MR imaging appears in these conditions. Now let's understand the imaging findings in optic neuritis. What are the findings that we see in optic neuritis? If we have a patient of optic neuritis, the optic nerve appears swollen, hyperintense on stir or T2 fat saturated images, and the intense homogeneous contrast enhancement will be seen on a contrast study. So the nerve will appear swollen, especially on fat saturated or stir MRIs, and also shows homogeneous contrast enhancement suggestive of inflammation in the optic nerve. So you can see the image here. Here the left optic nerve appears swollen. There is effacement of the subarachnoid space there. So this axial section, this is axial T1 weighted imaging. Axial T1 weighted imaging, which is showing a swollen optic nerve with effacement of the subarachnoid space, suggestive of a optic neuritis. And here, this is a sagittal T2 weighted image. And here also you can see that there is a swollen optic nerve with effacement of the subarachnoid space around. Now look at this image. Here, this is a T1 contrast fat saturated image. And if you see the intracoronal fat that is suppressed, so this is a fat suppressed image, T1 coronal fat suppressed image. And if you appreciate, this is the right optic nerve region and this is the left optic nerve region. You are clearly seeing that the left optic nerve appears more swollen, edematous, and shows this intense contrast enhancement. So this is your left optic neuritis. So this is how we detect left optic neuritis in our patients. And what are the findings that you see in optic neuritis in patients of multiple sclerosis? So if you have multiple sclerosis and optic neuritis, you see that the optic nerve is swollen and edematous, showing enhancement. You also see on FLAIR images this periventricular, just adjacent the ventricle, periventricular white matter hyperintensities. And you may also see small focal wedge-shaped hyperintense areas, the MS plaques in the spinal cord or in the periventricular white matter of the brain. This is how optic neuritis will be seen in a case of multiple sclerosis. And this is a FLAIR MRI. And on this FLAIR MRI, I hope you are able to see that this is the outer grey matter. The grey matter appears white and this is the inner white matter. The white matter appears dark. And the CSF signal in the ventricles is appearing dark. So this is fluid suppressed, same as T2. Grey matter is white, white matter is dark, and fluid is suppressed. So this is FLAIR MRI. And what do you see on this FLAIR MRI? On this FLAIR MRI, you are able to see periventricular white matter hyperintensities, which are very clearly standing out because the CSF signal is suppressed around the ventricles. These periventricular hyperintensities are standing out very conspicuously. And what else do you see? These plaques of MS, they are also involving the calloso-septal interface, the corpus callosum and the septum. The calloso-septal interface is involved in multiple sclerosis. You also see involvement in the areas of the splenium of corpus callosum. This is a flare image, sagittal section, showing what are called as the classic Dawson fingers. So these are your Dawson fingers. And in this Dawson fingers, you see this periventricular white matter hyperintensity is perpendicular to the ventricle, involving the callosum, right? This is Dawson fingers. Periventricular white matter hyperintensity is perpendicular to ventricle, involving the calloso-septal interface, right? These are your Dawson fingers. And this is your spinal MRI, showing you this focal small wedge-shaped areas of hyperintensities. You can see this small wedge-shaped area of hyperintensities in multiple sclerosis. Another thing to understand in multiple sclerosis or any demyelinating disorders is that you have a open ring enhancement, also called as a horseshoe ring enhancement. So when we give contrast, and if there are these active lesions of multiple sclerosis in the brain, you will see this open ring enhancement or horseshoe enhancement in the brain. You can see here, these are closed ring enhancing lesions, like in infections, metastasis, right, abscess. You will see these closed ring enhancing lesions. So open ring suggests demyelination, whereas closed ring suggests any neoplasms, abscess, infections. Okay, there are various causes of closed ring. So in demyelinating disorders like multiple sclerosis, you see this open ring enhancement. And if you look at the open ring enhancement of multiple sclerosis, you can see this is the enhancing part, and this enhancing part or the actively enhancing part is more towards the white matter of the brain, not towards the gray matter. So this horseshoe ring enhancement, you call it horseshoe ring enhancement. Is it an open ring or a closed ring enhancement? It is an open ring enhancement, right? We'll have the enhancement towards the white matter of the brain. The active part of the enhancement will be towards the white matter of the brain, not the gray matter. Remember, multiple sclerosis is a demyelinating disorder. A white matter is affected more. So you see that the advancing edge of the lesion is towards the white matter. And here you can see the horseshoe shape enhancements. Now, if we see what are the MR imaging findings in MOG antibody-associated optic neuritis, a very important finding that we see in MOG antibody-associated optic neuritis is the optic nerve sheath involvement. So, not just the optic nerve is involved, even the optic nerve sheath surrounding it is affected. And not just that, there can also be perineural involvement going into the intraconal fat, into the surrounding soft tissues. So, you can see it is not just the nerve that is involved, even the surrounding fat and the soft tissues are affected. This is a classic finding that you see in MOG antibody-associated optic neuritis. Optic nerve sheath involvement as well as perineural involvement. Here is the involvement of the optic nerve along with the optic nerve sheath, and you can see that MOG antibody and optic neuritis is usually bilateral, okay? Unlike multiple sclerosis, which is usually unilateral involvement, MOG antibody-associated optic neuritis as well as NMO, they generally tend to be bilateral optic neuritis. Now let's try to understand what is the finding that you see in MOG antibody-associated myelitis. MOG antibody-associated myelitis, it will show a sagittal line hyperintensity. So if you can see the image here, this is the sagittal line hyperintensity that you see in the spinal cord, especially involving the conus part of the spinal cord. And around this, you also see this cloudy enhancement, okay, that is seen around this hyperintensity. So the presence of this sagittal line hyperintensity and a cloudy enhancement there with irregular margins, so that would be suggestive of MOG antibody myelitis. Remember, MOG antibody myelitis is mainly having a conus involvement, which is considered to be a specific location for MOG antibody disease. Another involvement in MOG antibody myelitis, the spinal cord lesion, is the involvement of the central gray matter. And this central gray matter involvement produces a head-shaped hyperintensities, especially on the axial sections. You can see that the central gray matter is affected, producing this head-shaped hyperintensities. Now, this is axial flare MRIs taken in a 8-year-old girl with sudden vision loss. And when we look at the axial flare MRIs, you see that the bilateral hemispheres show this subcortical hyperintensities. So, presence of this multifocal subcortical hyperintensities with a history of sudden vision loss, and if you also have a history of fever or vaccination, strongly suspect ADEM, right? Acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. And you can see on the contrast images, the bilateral optic nerves are showing enhancement with some areas of enhancement in the brain, more so on the left side, the left optic nerve is appearing, enhancing. So this is MOG associated antibodies in children can also present with ADEM. Especially in children, MOG antibody associated encephalomyelitis can present as a ADEM. Now let's understand the MR imaging findings in NMO, right? In NMO spectral of disorders, if you see the imaging, you will see that they are bilateral optic neuritis that you see. There are bilateral optic nerves showing enhancement and swollen appearance, and on the imaging of the spine, you see there is a long segment extensive transverse myelitis extending over 3 vertebral bodies. This long segment extensive transverse myelitis is usually involving the cervical spinal cord in NMO. And you also see the involvement of the dorsal medullary region. So the area post-tremor, dorsal medullary region is also very commonly involved in NMO spectrum of disorders. Here is another case of NMO where you see that the right optic nerve is showing extensive involvement, and if you see the involvement of the optic nerve in NMO, it also involves mainly the posterior part of the optic nerve extending almost till the optic chiasma. So this involvement of the optic nerve, mainly the posterior part, the prechiasmatic part of the optic nerve, that is more in favor of NMO. And you also see there is long segment extensive transverse myelitis involving the cervical spinal cord. Now, looking at the imaging findings in the spinal cord in NMO, in the spinal cord, you see that there are high T2 signals spanning at least 3 vertebral segments, okay, and this has been called as longitudinally extensive spinal cord lesions. Whereas in multiple sclerosis, we have short focal segments involved in the spinal cord, whereas in case of MOG as well as NMO, you have a longitudinally extensive transverse myelitis. And another important and unique finding of NMO in the spinal imaging is the presence of these bright spotty lesions. So these bright spotty lesions are nothing but T2 hyperintensities, which are much brighter than the CSF signal present in the central gray matter. And this is a very specific feature seen with NMO. Now, let's look at this table helping us to differentiate the imaging findings in multiple sclerosis, in case of NMO spectrum of disorders, as well as your anti-MOG antibody disease. Now, if we compare these, the optic neuritis in multiple sclerosis is usually short segment and unilateral involvement. So, usually unilateral and also only a short segment of the optic nerve is affected in multiple sclerosis. Whereas in NMO and anti-MOG antibody diseases, they are bilateral optic neuritis and usually long segments of the optic nerve are involved. The important and unique differences are, in case of NMO, it usually involves the posterior part, including the chiasma can be involved in NMO spectrum of diseases. Whereas anti-MOG antibody, the important unique point is the perineural involvement of the optic nerve sheath and the surrounding intracorneal fat or the soft tissues will be affected in anti-MOG antibody disease. Please remember, it is long segment with perineural involvement. This word perineural involvement with anti-MOG antibody is important. Now, looking at the brain involvement, in MS, you see the classic periventricular white matter lesions, which we understood as, Dawson fingers. And there will also be some juxtacortical lesions, posterior fossa involvement. But remember the periventricular white matter lesions involving the callosocaptal interface, very classic for multiple sclerosis. In NMOs, there are periependymal lesions. Remember the aquaporin 4, this is abundant around the periependymal region. And that is the reason in NMO, you see the lesions in the brain, especially around the periependymal area post-trema, the dorsal aspect of the medulla, the dorsal medullary lesions. The brainstem may be affected, hemispheric white matter lesions may be seen, but mainly periependymal areas, the area post-trema, the dorsal medullary area, this involvement is very specific for NMO. And if we come to anti-MOG antibody disorders, they are deep white matter lesions here. In anti-MOG antibody disorders, there is deep gray matter involvement. You have some multifocal white matter lesions, especially when they are associated with ADEM, right? Multifocal lesions can be seen in anti-MOG antibody disorders. So if we compare the imaging findings in the spinal cord, in multiple sclerosis, we see focal wedge-shaped lesions, which are usually short segment. In NMO spectrum of disorders, we have a longitudinally extensive transverse myelitis, mainly involving the cervical and the dorsal cord. And you also see multiple bright spotty T2 hyperintensities in the central gray matter. So bright spotty lesions, which are T2 hyperintensities much brighter than the CSF in the central gray matter, will be a feature of NMO spectrum of diseases. Whereas anti-MOG antibody, the involvement in the spine is again longitudinally extensive transverse myelitis, as well as the involvement is mainly in the conus part of the spinal cord. You may also see the sagittal line hyperintensity with cloudy enhancement and the head-shaped areas of hyperintensities in the central gray matter. ADEM, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, is more frequently seen associated with anti-MOG antibody disease. This is a 18-year-old patient with known SLE. This is a known SLE patient, comes to you with vision blurring, and on MR imaging, if you see that on a MR imaging, you are seeing at the region of the optic chiasma, this is the region of the optic chiasma, especially in the left optic chiasma, you can see this hyperintense signal, as well as on contrast, you can see it is showing the swollen appearance and the contrast enhancement of the left optic chiasma. This is SLE associated optic neuropathy. And also remember, optic neuritis can be seen in many infections like Lyme's disease, syphilis, and zoster also. Here is an example. This is a patient of herpes zoster ophthalmicus, and we know that herpes zoster can cause keratitis, uveitis, and even optic neuritis. Here you can see in the right optic nerve, it is appearing swollen compared to the left side and is showing enhancement. This is right optic neuritis seen in a case of herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So it can be seen. So optic neuritis can be seen in association with multiple sclerosis, NMO spectrum of diseases, anti-MOG antibody diseases, inflammatory causes, right? You can see it with sarcoidosis, lupus. You can also see it with infective conditions, Lyme's disease, zoster, syphilis also. So I hope I have given you a comprehensive understanding of the imaging in optic neuritis. Thank you so much.